Welcome to our deep dive, everybody. Today we're going to be taking a look at con artists
Ooh.
and the psychology that they use to, well, con people.
Yes.
And we're going to be taking a look at some articles and research to hopefully learn how to spot these tactics and protect ourselves from falling prey to them. Because let's face it,
Yeah.
anyone can be conned.
Absolutely. And I think what's so interesting about con artists is that they're not relying on brute force.
Yeah.
It's not like a robbery where they're
Oh.
taking something from you.
Yeah.
They're actually using psychology and strategy to get what they want.
Yeah. So okay, let's unpack this psychological strategy.
Okay.
I read about the 6 stages of a con,
Yes.
and it's almost like a playbook that they follow.
It is, yeah.
And it starts with something called the put-up, where they choose a target.
Right.
But it's more than that. They're sizing you up.
Yeah, they're very observant.
They're figuring out your weaknesses.
Yeah, it's figuring out your desires. I mean, it's almost predatory, like a lion stalking its prey.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. I mean, they're very calculated.
Yeah.
They're looking at you.
Yeah.
They're seeing how you respond to things.
Right.
And then they tailor their approach accordingly.
So then they move on to the next stage, right? Which is
Yes.
called the play.
Yes, the play.
Yeah.
And this is where they craft a narrative or a scenario
Okay.
that is tailored to their mark-specific interests.
Yeah.
So, for example, we read about Joan,
Oh, right.
who fell head over heels for this guy, Greg,
Right.
who was just a complete fabrication preying on her desire for love and connection.
Oh, wow. So it's like a custom-made trap for each victim. They figure out what your desires are and they use that as bait.
Exactly. And once they've set the stage, they introduce what's called the rope.
Okay.
And this is where they deploy these persuasive tactics
Okay.
to try to overcome any resistance.
Yeah.
And to draw the victim deeper into the scheme. So,
Yeah.
for example, it could be something as simple as offering a small gift
Okay.
to trigger that sense of obligation.
Well, like that old saying.
Yes.
There's no such thing as a free lunch.
Precisely. And they're playing on our natural inclination for reciprocity.
Right.
You do something nice for me, I'll do something nice for you. And they can exploit that very effectively.
Okay. Well, I mean, and
And we read about Prince Morrison.
oh, right. The teenager
Yes.
who conned all those people into sending him money and old pants.
That's right. Yeah. By promising these unimaginable riches.
And he
He was a master at this.
really played on the
Yeah.
reciprocity.
He did.
It's kind of funny, but also disturbing how effective that is.
So, yeah. Like, how can people fall for that? But they do all the time.
Yeah.
So
But then what happens after they've roped you in, so to speak?
that's when the tail comes into play.
The tail. And that's where they start to back up their claims
Right.
with what seems like evidence, which often is fabricated,
Right.
but it makes the con seem more legitimate. So, for example, you remember the Drake fortune?
Yeah.
The infamous scam
Yeah.
where people were so desperate to believe in this hidden treasure that they
Right.
just ignored all these glaring inconsistencies and just clung to the narrative.
So they're not just making up a story, but they're playing on our kind of inherent desire to believe.
Yes.
Like even when
Yeah, so-
the evidence suggests otherwise.
Right. And that speaks to this idea of confirmation bias.
Yeah.
Once we've bought into something, we tend to look for information that confirms that belief, and we just dismiss anything that contradicts it.
Wow.
So, yeah.
So okay. So they're weaving a tale. They're tapping into our
Yeah.
confirmation bias.
Mhm.
I mean, what happens next? Do they just ask for money and run?
Well, not always. Often there's a stage called the convincer where they'll provide a small taste of success
Okay.
to solidify the mark's belief and kind of make them crave more. So this could be like an initial payout or some sort of demonstration that shows the scheme's effectiveness.
So it's almost like they're giving you a sample to hook you.
Exactly, like those free samples at the grocery store.
Right.
Yeah, and this creates this illusion of control, right?
Right.
It makes the mark feel like, oh, I'm in the driver's seat.
Right.
But in reality, they're being very carefully
Manipulated. It is, yeah. So they lure you in with this tale.
Yeah.
They back it up with some evidence, and then they give you a little taste of success. But the con has to unravel at some point, right?
It does, absolutely. And that's where the breakdown comes in.
Yes.
The breakdown is where the con artist will introduce doubts and complications, often manufactured, to increase the mark's anxiety and their dependence on the con artist for a solution.
Oh, so they're deliberately creating a crisis.
They are.
So you'll cling to them as your savior.
Yes, yes.
And then when you're at your most vulnerable, that's when the
send happens. The send, which is basically the request for a bigger investment.
Right.
I need more money from you.
And they're exploiting that fear of loss, that desperation to recoup what's already been.
Right. And this is where the sunk cost fallacy comes in.
Okay.
We're so reluctant to walk away from something we've already invested in,
right,
even when it's clear that
when the evidence says
otherwise. Didn't we talk about wasn't there an example of that with the...
Yes. We talked about the investors in the Franklin Syndicate.
Well, oh, right.
Even when they were faced with evidence of fraud, they
kept pouring money into the scheme, hoping to recover their losses.
Right, right. Like that old saying, throwing good money after bad.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, okay, so the breakdown sets the stage for the big score, right?
It does.
The touch.
The touch, that's right.
And is that when they just disappear with the money?
You got it. The touch is the final act.
Oh.
That's where the con artist disappears with the loot, leaving the mark with nothing but shattered dreams and a sense of betrayal.
It's a classic disappearing act.
It is.
Right. Poof.
Yeah.
They're gone.
Gone.
But the con doesn't always end there, does it?
It doesn't. Often there's a blow-off.
Okay.
And a fixed stage where the con artist tries to ensure the victim's silence.
Oh, interesting.
So this could be through threats or through manipulating them into feeling like they're somehow complicit in the scheme.
Wow. So it's like adding insult to injury.
It is.
Right. You've not only been robbed, but now you're left feeling...
You're feeling ashamed to even speak up about it.
Too ashamed to speak up?
Yes.
So, okay. So we've got the put up, the play, the rope, the tail.
That's right.
The convincer, the breakdown, the send the touch, and then sometimes even a blow off and a fix.
Yes.
I mean, it's a
complex
web
manipulation. Yeah. And remember, these stages aren't always linear, right?
Right.
A skilled con artist can blend them seamlessly.
I think it makes it really hard.
It can be difficult to recognize what's happening until it's too late.
And that's what makes it so terrifying.
Yes.
Because it can happen
to anyone
at any time.
At any time.
At any time.
Yeah.
So how do we protect ourselves from these master manipulators?
Well, I think one of the key things is understanding the psychology that they're using against us. So, for example, they exploit what's called our intuitive psychology.
Intuitive psychology.
Yeah. So they're master observers.
Right.
They're picking up on these subtle cues in your behavior, your language, your appearance.
Right.
And they're using that to create a very tailored...
Right. So they're creating a mirror image of yourself.
They are.
To make you feel like...
To make you feel understood.
This person understands me.
Right. Connected. And then that lowers your defenses.
Exactly. Exactly. Think about the case of Sylvia Mitchell.
Oh, right. The psychic.
The psychic who convinced her client, Deborah, that she was an Egyptian princess in a past life.
Right. Right.
I mean, it was a fantastical story,
right?
But it was also a very calculated manipulation.
Right, right.
It was preying on Deborah's desire for meaning and identity.
Right. So they're not just reading us; they're using that information.
They're using it to create this custom designed illusion. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
That is.
So what other psychological?
Well, another big one is emotions, right? They are experts at leveraging emotions to override logical thinking.
Right.
So think back to Joan, who we talked about earlier.
The one who fell in love with Greg.
Exactly. Her longing for love and companionship made her incredibly vulnerable to Greg's charms.
So they're kind of hacking our emotional circuitry and using our feelings against us.
Exactly. And, another psychological vulnerability they often prey on is this belief in exceptionalism.
Oh, interesting.
Right. The idea that I'm somehow special.
Right.
I'm immune to the pitfalls that trap other people.
It won't happen to me.
It won't happen to me.
Yeah, right.
And it's interesting because both the con artist and the mark often share this belief.
Right. So the con artist thinks they're too clever to get caught.
Exactly.
And the mark.
The mark thinks, I'm too smart to fall for this.
You're right.
Yeah.
And that's a very dangerous combination. That's a recipe for disaster.
It is.
Yeah.
And then there's that confirmation bias that we talked about.
Yeah.
Once we've bought into a story,
Right.
we tend to seek out information that confirms our belief, even if it means ignoring
Right.
these glaring red flags. Think about the Drake fortune again.
Yeah.
People clung to that narrative despite overwhelming evidence to the
the-
contrary.
Like we're wearing blinders.
Yes.
And we're filtering out anything.
Filtering out anything that contradicts that desired.
That contradicts our desired reality, right?
Yeah.
So it's not just about being smart or savvy. It's about
recognizing that we have these vulnerabilities that can be
they
exploited.
have these vulnerabilities. Yeah.
Yes,
Wow. That's fascinating
it is.
and scary all at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So,
Well, this has been really interesting.
yeah, it's been a good overview. I think in the next part, we should really delve into some more specific
Yeah.
strategies.
So stay tuned, folks.
Yes.
We'll be back after a quick break to explore some of those strategies for recognizing and avoiding these
Manipulative.
tactics. All right, welcome back, everybody. We've been talking about the psychology behind con artists, how they exploit our desires and our biases and even our belief that we're somehow special,
Right. Are exceptional as a...
and immune to this stuff. But knowledge is power, right?
Absolutely.
So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about how to spot these manipulative tactics and protect ourselves.
Yeah, let's get practical.
Yeah, let's get practical. So
Yeah.
what's the first
Well,
line of defense?
one of the most important things is recognizing that con artists are really good at exploiting this thing called the illusion of control.
Okay, remind me what that is again.
Yeah. So the illusion of control is basically this tendency we all have to overestimate
Okay.
our ability to influence outcomes,
Okay.
especially in situations where there's a lot of chance or uncertainty involved.
Okay.
Remember those students we talked about who thought they could predict coin tosses?
Right, yeah.
They thought they had this skill,
Right.
but there was no skill involved. It was just
Right.
pure chance.
Right.
So con artists tack into this.
Okay.
They make us feel like we're in the driver's seat,
Right.
when in reality,
Puppy.
we're being steered in a predetermined direction.
So a healthy dose of realism is in order here.
Yes.
Right.
Definitely.
We need to kind of recognize that we don't always have as much control
We don't have as much control as we think we do.
that we think we do.
Especially in these kinds of situations.
Yeah. Okay, so what other traps?
Well, another big one is the sunk cost fallacy
Okay.
and the endowment effect.
Oh.
So basically, the more we invest in something,
Whether it's time, money, emotion,
right,
the harder it becomes to walk away,
right.
even when logic tells us we should.
Oh, it's like we're stuck in
It's
psychological quicksand.
Psychological quicksand. The
Yeah.
more you struggle,
Yeah.
the deeper you sink.
The deeper you sink. Yeah.
And we talked about the Teton Dam disaster
Right.
as an example of this.
Right, where they just kept investing
in this dam, even though there was evidence that it was unsafe.
Right. Yeah.
And that led to, obviously, a very tragic outcome.
Tragic outcome. Yeah. So how do we avoid?
I think it's about being very disciplined and objective, setting clear boundaries,
Okay.
establishing some objective criteria for what success looks like,
Okay.
and being willing to reevaluate our
Yeah.
position
Okay.
when the situation changes.
So it's like a financial
It's like a financial plan,
something that
but for your emotions and your and beliefs. Yeah.
Yeah.
But con artists are clever, right?
They are very clever.
I mean, they've got a whole
That's how I would
arsenal
write.
of persuasive tactics
Persuasive tactics
that they use to keep us hooked.
to keep us hooked. Absolutely.
So what are some of their go-to techniques?
Well, one of the classics is reciprocity.
Okay.
Right. So they'll do you a small favor
That's right.
to create a sense of obligation that makes you more likely to comply with a later request.
Like the classic?
Like the classic, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours.
Right, yeah. And we're naturally inclined to
We are
want to pay favors.
Reciprocate.
Yeah.
And Prince Morrison used this very effectively, right?
He did, yeah. He offered these small gifts.
He did,
And then
really.
he hit people up for money and
For money and clothing.
Yeah. It's such a simple tactic, but
It works.
it works, yeah.
It works.
Okay, so what's another one of their
Another classic is the door in the face technique.
the door in the face techniques?
So this is where they'll start by asking for a large, unreasonable favor, which you'll naturally refuse.
Right.
And then they'll follow up with a smaller, more reasonable request,
right.
which makes it much harder to say no to.
Right. So they're playing on our guilt and our desire to.
They are playing on our guilt and our desire to appear reasonable and helpful.
So they shift your frame of reference.
They do.
Right. They shift it.
So that second request seems
smoke reference.
Much more appealing.
Exactly. So that second request seems much smaller.
Yeah. Didn't we, I think there's a story about that.
Yeah, there was. Matthew Brown.
Matthew Brown.
Right. He was the one who conned a Marchioness.
Oh, right.
Into honoring a Canadian check.
And he did this by first asking for this outlandish favor.
Right.
To visit his family compound in Monaco.
His family's compound, yeah.
Which, of course, she refused.
Right.
And then he followed up with this
right.
seemingly more reasonable.
Oh, can you just honor this check?
Can you just honor this check for me?
Yeah.
It was a classic.
It's like a psychological
it is.
Bait and switch.
Bait and switch.
But instead of products, they're manipulating your your willingness to
comply.
To comply.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow. Okay, so what else did they do?
Well, another big one is framing.
Framing.
So this is basically controlling how information is presented.
Okay.
To influence your perceptions and your decisions.
Okay.
So they might use leading questions.
Okay.
They might selectively present evidence.
Okay.
They might even use subtle cues in their body language to kind of steer you. So they're setting up this psychological obstacle
course.
Right.
Where they're guiding you toward a predetermined conclusion.
Yeah, without you even realizing it.
Or without you even realizing it. You know, think about that study we read.
Right.
Where they asked those students to rate restaurants. And they found that simply changing the order in which the information was presented influenced their preferences.
Right.
Even though the underlying facts about the restaurants remain the same.
Right. Wow.
Wow.
It's amazing how easily our judgments can be swayed. By these seemingly insignificant details.
Yeah.
And con artists are very good at recognizing these nuances.
Yeah.
And using them to nudge you toward their desired outcome.
It's like they're playing chess with your mind.
It is. It's like a game of psychological chess.
Yeah.
They're thinking several moves ahead.
Right. Yeah.
And trying to checkmate your better judgment.
That's a good way to put it. They're thinking several moves ahead, and you're just trying to keep up.
Right.
Yeah.
So what other things should we be?
Well, let's talk about information priming.
On the lookout for. Okay, information priming.
So this is where con artists will often plant seeds of information early on to subtly introduce ideas or concepts that they'll later exploit.
So they're kind of laying the groundwork. For future manipulation.
Okay. And by subtly introducing an idea, they make it seem more familiar and therefore more credible when they bring it up again later. You know, it's kind of like that old saying, repeat a lie often enough and it becomes the truth.
Right. So repetition and familiarity can create this illusion of truth.
They create an illusion of truth.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. That's powerful. Right. I mean, it's a reminder that our perceptions aren't always objective. They could be easily influenced by these external factors.
Sometimes without us even aware of it.
Without our conscious awareness.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So what else do we need?
Well, con artists also love to use authority to their advantage.
Okay.
So they might use impressive titles. They might drop names of influential people.
Right.
They might even fabricate entire credentials.
It's all about
there.
Creating this illusion of expertise.
Credibility.
Yeah.
It's all about creating that aura of expertise, even if they have no real qualifications.
Right. And wasn't that the case with Damara?
Yes.
The guy who
posed as a surgeon.
As a surgeon on a Canadian Navy destroyer.
On a Canadian Navy destroyer, right?
Yeah. He had no medical training. He
convinced everyone he was a qualified surgeon. And he even performed life-saving procedures.
That's incredible.
It's incredible. And his success was largely due to his ability to just project authority.
Yeah. Project authority and expertise. Yeah.
Even under pressure.
Yeah. Even under pressure.
He was a complete fraud.
Yeah. That's a chilling reminder that we often place too much trust in titles and appearances.
We do. We place too much trust in appearances.
Yeah, even when the evidence suggests otherwise.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then finally, let's not forget about cognitive overload.
Cognitive overload, okay.
So con artists will often just bombard their victims with information to create this sense of confusion and overwhelm.
It's like you're throwing...
It's like a smoke grenade, right?
It's a smoke grenade. It's designed to just...
To distract you from their true intentions.
Distract you.
From what they're really up to.
Remember that story about Tyler Alterman?
Oh.
The student who snuck into bars.
Right.
Using something called the peak technique.
The peak technique, that's right.
Yeah, he would just
overloaded the bouncers with all this irrelevant information.
Irrelevant information, and it would distract them.
Distracting them from the fact that he was underage.
From checking his ID.
Yeah. So when we're overloaded.
When we're cognitively overloaded.
Information.
Our cognitive resources are depleted.
Okay.
And
we're more susceptible to.
We're susceptible to suggestion.
Then less likely.
And less likely to spot those.
To spot those inconsistencies.
Inconsistencies, right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So it's not just about being smart or savvy. It's about recognizing that we're all vulnerable.
Recognizing our vulnerabilities.
To these psychological tactics. Especially when we're tired or stressed or distracted.
Especially when we're tired, stressed, or distracted.
Right.
Yeah. So that brings us to some of the practical strategies for recognizing and avoiding manipulation.
All right. So we've laid the groundwork. We've explored
the tactics.
The tactics, and now
let's arm ourselves with some defenses.
It's time to equip ourselves with some defenses.
Yeah.
Welcome back to our deep dive, everybody. We've been exploring some of the tactics that con artists use.
Yes.
But now let's talk about how to actually recognize those.
Yeah.
And avoid being manipulated.
Right, yeah. Because knowledge is power.
Exactly.
So the more we know about these tactics, the better equipped we'll be to defend against them.
Okay, so what's the first line of defense here?
Well, one of the most important things is to be aware of your emotional triggers.
Okay.
Pay attention to how you feel when you're interacting with someone.
Okay.
If you start to feel really excited or really pressured or sense a lot of urgency, that's a sign that maybe you need to take a step back.
Okay.
And analyze the situation more logically.
Right.
Don't let your emotions
so it's like
hijack your decision making.
Installing an emotional circuit breaker.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Right.
If things start to feel too heated, take a break, reassess.
Yeah.
See if things still make sense when you're thinking more clearly.
But sometimes even when we try to be rational, we can still fall prey to our own biases.
Absolutely. That's why it's so important to cultivate a healthy skepticism.
Okay.
And be willing to question everything.
Okay.
Don't be afraid to ask questions.
Right.
Even if they seem inconvenient or even rude.
Right.
A legitimate offer should be able to withstand scrutiny.
Yeah.
You know, we read about Justin Peters.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Your writer who almost got scammed.
Yeah, when he was trying to buy...
those airline miles on Craigslist.
Airline miles, yeah.
Right. And his experience shows how important it is to do your own research.
Yeah.
Don't just rely on what someone is telling you.
Right.
Verify the information independently.
Especially these days with the internet, we have access to...
We have so much information.
So much information.
At our fingertips. There's really no excuse not to do our due diligence.
So yeah, don't be afraid to do your research. Check those sources.
Exactly.
Seek out expert opinions before you make any big decisions.
Especially big financial decisions.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. What else can we do?
Well, trust your gut.
Okay.
You know, that intuition that we all have.
Right.
It often picks up on things that our conscious mind misses.
Okay.
So if something feels off, it probably is.
Yeah, so it's like having that...
Just an internal alarm system.
Internal alarm system.
If that alarm starts ringing,
Right.
Pay attention, investigate further.
Okay. What about those situations where we're kind of swayed by the crowd?
Right.
Like you see all those testimonials on those ads, you know?
Yeah, that's social proof at work.
Yeah.
And con artists love to exploit that.
Right.
They'll show you all these testimonials or they'll tell you that everybody's doing it.
Right.
To try to sway your opinion. But remember, social proof can be easily manipulated.
Okay.
So don't be swayed by those testimonials without verifying them.
Right. So it's kind of like
Look for objective evidence.
A savvy consumer.
Yes.
Right.
Be a skeptic.
Read those reviews, compare prices.
Exactly.
And don't be afraid to walk away if
something seems too good to be true.
Seems too good to be true.
It probably is.
Right. Okay. Any other advice?
I think the most important thing to remember is that anyone can fall for a con.
Okay.
It's not a sign of stupidity.
Right.
It just means that the con artist was very skilled.
Right.
At manipulating your psychology.
Yeah, it's not a reflection on you.
It's not a reflection on you. Don't let embarrassment or shame keep you from seeking help or reporting a scam.
Right.
Because sharing your experience can help protect others from becoming victims.
So it's about breaking that cycle of silence.
Yes.
And empowering ourselves and others
exactly.
to recognize and resist. The manipulation.
Manipulation.
Yes. Okay. So what have we learned?
Well, I think we've learned that con artists are very good at what they do.
From this deep dive.
They're master manipulators. Right. They exploit our desires, our biases, our vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
But we've also learned that by understanding their tactics and cultivating that healthy skepticism, we can protect ourselves.
We can protect ourselves.
From falling prey to their schemes.
Yeah. It's been a fascinating journey into this kind of the dark side of human psychology, but it's also been
human psychology
a reminder of our resilience.
It is.
And our capacity for growth.
Our capacity for growth. And, the more we understand about the psychology of persuasion, the better equipped we'll be to create a world where trust and authenticity and genuine connection can thrive.
Very well said. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the world of con artists. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe.